let's get started. So go back to Genesis chapter 12, and we're going to go to the first verse. And actually, we're going to go to 11 first, chapter 11 first. And I want you to look at the 27th verse. Now, in the 27th verse, he begins by saying, now these are the chronicles of Terah. Terah brought Avraham, Nahor, and Haran begot Lot, and Haran died in his lifetime of Terah, his father, in his native land of Ur-Kasdim. Now, Haran dies in his native land. That native land was Ur-Kasdim. Now, we understand from last night, I told you, Ur was a place, but Ur also spoke of a furnace, and it was the first hint of the first event that happened. There's 10 trials that have been established for Abraham. And the sages, when they go back and look, say that this is the first of the 10 trials, was going through the fiery furnace. This was where it all actually began. And so there's some differences of understanding, but this appears to be the first. Some go further back and say that the first trial that he had was the fact that he was 3 years old and living in a cave and hiding from Nimrod at that particular point in time, because he was seen as being the challenger to Nimrod. So it's either the first or the second. Again, 10 trials. There are multiple ways that you can identify the 10. There could be more than 10 if you really looked at it, but it speaks to 10 trials at this particular point in time. So it says that Haran dies in his native land. Haran was the third son. This is where he was born, is in Ur-Kasdim. The other sons were not born there, and we'll get to understanding that as we go along. But when we go back, we're going to find that there's a different place for this whole thing. So anyway, as we go on, he lists again all the people that are going. Verse 31, so Terah took his son Avram and Lot, and son of Haran, and his grandson, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, and his wife, the wife of Avraham, his son, and they departed with them to Ur-Kasdim to go to the land of Canaan. And they arrived in Haran, and they settled there. So they choose this place to settle. Then the question becomes, why do they settle here? Which is the understanding that we're going to get in a minute. Notice verse 32. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Okay. One of the things that's going to come up is the fact that Avraham will leave Haran when he's 75 years old. Now, do the math. At 70, Avraham is born. So we're now 135 years into Terah's life when Avraham leaves. And so the question comes, why did he leave his father behind? Now it says his father died. Rashi will go on to tell you in Bereshit Rabbah 39:7, Terah speaks of, for the wicked evil, while alive, are called dead. And so he was able to leave because he was called dead, or at least that was given as an impression, a possibility. Now in Genesis 15:15, I want you to go to Genesis 15:15. And we're going to look at that verse for a second. It says, as for you, you shall come to your ancestors in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. Now he's talking to Abraham, but he says, notice, he says that you shall be buried with whom? Your ancestors. From that verse, Pirkei Avot begins to tell us that they believed that while he was at Haran, Terah was changed, that he indeed repented. And therefore, when Avraham dies, he will meet his father in the world to come, or in the next world. And so there's this understanding that this was not over at this point. He simply left him there, and he's moving on from that place on, okay? Now let's go back to verse 12, or chapter 12, verse 1. and start there. This verse is loaded, if I can say that word. It says, Hashem said to Avraham. Now, this is one of those physical times when Avraham hears directly from God. And so this is a vision. It occurs during the day, and it appears as though he is speaking to him directly here. So Hashem speaks to him and says, 1, go for yourself. Lech lecha. Lech lecha. Now, in Hebrew, if you go to those two words, you're going to find that it's the letter lamed kaf. Lamed kaf. Lamed is 30. Kaf is 20. You double it, you have 100. Now, some will tell you that this is a hint as to when he actually will receive his son, because Isaac is born when he is 100. That's the hint that's coming. But there's more to it. So go for yourself. 2, from your land. From your land. In other words, this is where Avraham was born. He was born in Haran. His father, Terah, moved the family from Haran to Ur Kasdim to be close to Nimrod. Now remember, from last night's discussion, Nimrod was the king in that area. Terah believed strongly in Nimrod and literally moved his family there to be close to Nimrod. He began by setting up his idol shop there. And in setting up his idol shop, he became good friends with Nimrod. Nimrod then, as we go through the story, finds himself depending upon Terah. Terah and he become very, very close. In fact, when Nimrod feels threatened because of this coming birth of this one that will overtake him, he orders Terah to kill the babies. And so therefore we begin this story of the destruction of infants, similar to the story when Moshe was around. So we're looking at the same kind of events. It's a do-over. So he leaves from the land of Haran. And the third one is from your relatives. Now, in the Zohar, which is the mystical understandings, I want to give you something to think about. And I'm not sure how deep you understand the Zohar, but the Zohar is the secret. It's the beyond the explanation. It goes into the detail. We can literally read this and see that he's leaving this particular place. But this actually, according to the Jewish mystics, this is a description of how you and I and our soul departs from God and comes to this world that we're living in. First off, you and I find ourselves in the well of souls. That's where we were birthed. That's where we're at. That's in the realm that's called Beriah. That's the third heaven up from this earth, the third world up from this earth. God sends us on our mission down. From there, we go from our land. So we leave Beriah, we go to the next world, and that's the world of formation, or what we call Yetzirah. Now, in the world of Yetzirah, we are descending with the angels. We leave that level and we're going from our relatives. So we're going from the angelic level, we're going down to the level of earth, Asiyah. This is the level of action. This is where all things happen. So all of us have to go through this. Now, there's another story called the Book of Jonah that deals with this very same subject, the idea of going down, coming to this earth. So as you look at this, we look at ourselves as going down from here. Literally, he goes down towards what we would call Israel today. He moves down. Now, if you go to chapter 13 and look at the first verse, notice what it says. So Abraham does what? He went up. So the story of his life is going down. The end of his life, or the end of the sets of events, is to go up. This is what's happening. They're now going up as opposed to going down. Now, when you and I descend from up, one of the things that happens, or one of the blessings that are placed upon us, are the same blessings that Abraham speaks of here. If you go to the next verse, I will make of you a great nation. In other words, he promises to have we will provide for others. He goes from there, I will bless you and make you a name great. Now, you and I don't see our names as ever being great. But when we go back and reflect on our lives, one of the things that happens as you reflect is some of the great things that you did. Now, they don't seem great now. Understand that. But you will go back, or people will go back and reflect on your life as how you affected them, how your life inspired. In other words, you have a spark that's drawing sparks from other people. He goes on to say, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. In other words, our life is strictly for the purpose of drawing. You know, if you can't realize what your real occupation in life was, your life spiritually was to draw others, create connections between you and other people. That's the purpose of our lives. Now, when we go through the recounting at the end, that's what we recount. How did you impact other people around you? That's really what our life is really about. And so Abraham leaves given that message. Now, we see that message attached to only him, but the answer is no, it's not just his message. It's the message to all of us, because we all have a soul. We all came down. We all went through life and are going through life. And at the end, we will go back to where we came from, back to God. And so our story is this story. Now, in our story, if you continue on in the story, you'll notice several things happening. So Abraham went as Hashem had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. Now, Lot attaches himself to Abraham, not because he's spiritually guided this way. He is there on a material mission, which we find after he comes back from Egypt, when he has so many cattle and sheep and all of the other things that his herdsmen can't get along with anybody. In fact, Abraham separates himself from him. Now, that's what's going to go on. But Lot comes for the purpose of Abraham is going to die soon. I'm sure of it. And when he does, I want to inherit everything that he has. His purpose was financial. Remember when Abraham separates from Lot, what happens? He says, Lot, you choose. Where do you want to go? And Lot went to the well-watered valleys, indicating that he was going to go where it's easiest. He was going to go to himself for the purposes of developing and growing. By the time he finishes, he sits at the gates of the city of Sodom. He becomes a judge within the city of Sodom. He becomes part of Sodom. Now, God will save him from that, but his goal was himself, gathering his own wealth. And so that's why he chooses where he chooses. But here it says that Abram went as Hashem had spoken to him. He takes Lot with him. Now, at this point in time, it says that he is 75 years old as he goes. Now, Abraham took his wife Sarai and Lot, his brother's son, and all their wealth, and they had amassed, and the souls that they made in Haran. Again, the souls he made in Haran were those who came to his understanding. Remember what he was about, what set him apart. Remember, he's called Avraham Avri, Abraham from the other side. In other words, he's found himself separated from what's going on. I was reading Ginsburg again this morning, and I want to read a paragraph that I got from one of his writings. It begins by saying, the world was shrouded in darkness for 19 generations until Abraham began to illuminate it. Darkness is not only a symbol for a state in which people do not recognize the Creator, in spite of the fact that he is known to all the Tzaddikim of all generations. Darkness also symbolizes the limitation imposed on this universe, limitations that confine it to the law of conservation of energy. In other words, nothing can be created or destroyed, only its form can be changed. That's all that can happen in this world, which dictates that everything that takes place in the universe is nothing more than an exchange, a reincarnation, or a recycling of what was originally there. Noah, for all his righteousness and awareness of divine, could not break through these limitations. The apex of his success can only be described as conservation. Noah preserved life, nothing more. Avraham, on the other hand, is not as much about preserving life, although he does. He's about changing life, changing the lives of the people, bringing new light into them. That's what he is about. That's why God is sending him on this mission. That's why God sends you and I on our mission. We're the purpose of enlightening. That's what we're supposed to be doing, is to enlighten. So Abraham then goes down. I want you to look at verse 5 now. It says, Abraham took his wife, his son Lot, and their wealth, and they amassed, and the souls that they made in Haran, and they left to go to the land of Canaan. Now, if you were with me last night, one thing you should understand is that the area that he's going into belonged originally to the tribe of Shem. The Shemites lived in this area. The Canaanites that are just now beginning to move in, which is why God is not killing the Canaanites off now. They're just beginning to go into their heretical belief system, but they're beginning to capture the cities that we will find later. Now it says, and they came to the land of Canaan. Abraham passed into the land as far as the site of Shechem. Now, if you read this chapter, one of the things you're going to notice is that he goes to specific places. He arrives at Shechem. If you remember Shechem is that place when Jacob comes into the land. That's the first place he goes when he brings his family into the land. And remember, that's where he settles. He creates his little ranch that's just outside. He calls it Sukkah. It's just outside Shechem. It's the place where his daughter is raped by Shechem, the king of that nation. We also know that Shechem is the place just outside of it are two mountains. One mountain is called the mountain Gerizim, which is the mountain of blessing, and the other mountain is the mountain called Eval, which is the mountain of the curse. So this is a very significant place that he comes to. He comes to a place where we begin blessings and curses. And so as Abraham is passing through, Abraham is getting an understanding of what's going to happen to his people. Shechem is also the place, today it's called Nablus. Well, in the year 2000, there was a intifada in Israel in which the Palestinians destroyed the tomb of Joseph of Egypt, that Joseph. He was buried at Shechem, and they destroyed his tomb. They made his gravestone into a giant urinal. So they defiled the entire place. The Jewish people have now gotten it back, but the city that surrounds it is all Palestinian. In order for you to go to see the tomb, or the place which actually what became a study hall, in order to get there, you have to go on an armored bus, and you go at night, and you go in a caravan. You're allowed to stay there only a few hours, and then you return back to wherever you came from. So Shechem is a very significant place. According to the Zohar, Shechem is a place where we begin to see the coming of the Messiah. So when Shechem became important, as Joseph's tomb is destroyed, we're now beginning to look at one of those footsteps of God bringing the Messiah back to this earth. So as time goes on, we watch different scenes play out, but that's what's going on at Shechem. So he begins to look at that. And it says, to your offspring, I will give this land. And so he built an altar there who appeared to him. So he builds an altar there, but it doesn't say where there is, because it goes on to say from there, he relocated to the mountain east of Bethel. Now, Bethel is the house of God. So is Bethel the name of the city, or is Bethel the name of a place? If it's the name of the place, then we're really standing on Mount Moriah. That's where he built the altar. Because remember, that same mountain was the mountain where when Adam offered sacrifices, where Cain and Abel will offer sacrifices, where Noah will offer sacrifices, and now where Avraham will offer sacrifices. It becomes the very significant place already from the beginning. And that's where he pitched his tent, between Bethel and on the west and Ai on the east. Ai is a heap of ruin. So he puts it between God and a heap of ruin. He faces God. The heap of ruin is behind him. Literally saying, if we think about it, he's really literally saying, I am moving towards God and away from my past. That's the direction that he's moving at this particular point in time. So they journeying steadily towards the south. So he's continuing towards the south. Eventually, he will end up in Egypt. And we go through the stories of Egypt. So the stories of Egypt then are, again, the testings. Again, we come to this testing that will go on down there. He will leave there and come back north, come back to the land itself where he's supposed to be. We're in chapter 14. We spent time talking about the battle with the four kings. And the four kings that he battled that day, one of the kings was Ampharel, which is the name for another name for Nimrod. He battles against the Greeks. He battles against the Persians, and he battles against the Romans. So within this first two chapters, he's hinted at what's going to happen in the future. And so everything that he's doing is nothing more than bringing us understanding of where we're going in the future. That's what's happening at this particular point. I want to leave it at that point, and if you have questions regarding this, that's fine. If you have other questions regarding this whole section, this whole parsha, I'd be glad to try to answer them, and hopefully I won't have to spend the night digging through my books in order to find an answer for you. But anyway, that's what's going on. I don't have any notes for today. This is off the top of my head. So, you're going to have to live with just a video if you want to go back and review what I just said. But anyway, that's what's there.